Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Monday, March the 30th. And as we like to do on Mondays, we'll be chatting today with our good friend Bill Katz, the editor of Urgent Agenda. We'll get into Iran, some local domestic issues as well. Bill, welcome. It's always great to have you.
Oh well, thank you, thank you, Sylvia. I hope a pleasure to be here. Um, I was reminded when I was thinking about the show half an hour ago of an old comment that was made by Bill Goldman, who was a very distinguished screenwriter, and he wrote a book about Hollywood, and he said, "In Hollywood, nobody knows anything." And I've got getting that same sensation
Well, I
watching
know
the
what you
news.
mean by
Yes,
the coverage of this war. It's almost like there's two wars going on.
well, that's right.
And also by the polling data. I just told you off the air that on the same day, two polls come through. I saw them over at the X or formerly Twitter. The first one says President Trump's approval is at 32%. The other one says 46%. I mean, that's it. it
That's it's quite a spread.
yeah. I mean, that's like somebody goofed. That's all I can say in that sample.
Well,
Uh,
I think that's true. But look, polling has now become part of the political process. It
right.
wasn't invented to be that way, but polling has a fascinating history, going back to 1936, when the polls indicated that the opponent of Franklin Roosevelt was going to do awfully well. And they were way off. I mean, way off. And when they studied the polls, they found that they had a disproportionate number of people who owned telephones, and and they were the people that were being polled.
Right,
And of
right.
course, they were the Republicans
Well,
in those days. In
yeah, a
those
couple
days.
of things about polls. Uh, the first one, the first one is something that my father said, and I always remember that when I see these polls. My late father one time said, in a joking way, but sometimes jokes can be very significant. He
Yeah.
said there are more polls in this country than gas stations.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really a good way to describe it. Seems like everybody has a poll. That kind of leads
Yes.
me to my next point, which is it seems like that's how they're reporting the news right now by saying, our new poll says this, which is a kind of a neat way of keeping reporters off the streets. You know what I mean? Instead of the reporter being out in the street asking people real questions and talking to real people, now it's like they just sit there and say, "Okay, we're going to call 10,000 people, and hopefully we'll get 3,000 that meet this criteria." And I don't know if going back to the days when you had the reporter in the notebook, I don't know if that's still possible, but those guys were more reliable, I would think. When you walk into a small business 50 years ago with a notebook, you were probably going to get a better sense of where things were than when you're trying to call people who never answer the phone anyway.
Well, that's right. That's right. Polls are really delicate creatures because so much depends on how the question is asked, who you're calling, how many people are involved, and on what day of the week it is. I mean, it's if you call over a weekend, you're going to get a different result. And I think we've probably too much put pay too much attention to polls, but the pollsters will say, "Well, it's important to know how the public thinks." Well, it is if you're actually polling the public,
That's right.
And what do you mean by the word public?
Yes, and I always think the most hilarious of these polls are these instant polls that they take.
Yes,
And
right.
and I'm sitting there going, president. I mean, whoever the president is, They speak. The State of the Union is usually over by 9:30 Central Time, which is 10:30 your time. Which means probably a lot of people are getting ready to go to bed. The ones who were watching, they're getting ready to go to bed. So I don't know how many people are in a mood to talk to a pollster at 10:30 at night Eastern time. You get a phone. I mean, your phone is ringing. It's whatever it is, and you don't recognize the call. You're not going to take it.
Right.
And that's one of the problems with pollsters. I'll never forget one time I was talking to John Zogby, and he said that the problem with polling these days is that you have to call so many people to get one person who will talk to you,
That's right.
not even answer questions, just talk to you, that the quality, goes out. Because if you have to call 50 people to get someone to answer the phone and even agree with you, I mean, and then they ask them like 35 questions. I don't know how they do that. It just, I don't know. I, I sometimes I think that online polls may be more reliable because people take them at their pleasure. They're not talking to somebody on the phone. But I'm
Yes.
not sure how reliable those are either.
Well, I would love to see an article on polling that includes the different kinds of polls that are taken, including the Nielsen polls,
Yeah.
home audiences. They seem to think those are very, very accurate. I don't know how they do it, and and the things that aren't really polls that are done electronically. Um, uh, there are surveys that people swear by, and they say,
Yeah.
"Well, this is what the audience is really thinking." And I don't know, but
Well, the advertisers swear by them because they're willing to pay advertising rates based on the number of people who are watching, and that's how they get the info from these Nielsen polls, right? Or
yes.
yeah,
Well,
so
I was once talking. In fact, I was visiting somebody at CBS in California. We were both waiting for our meetings, and he was from the advertising industry, and he said, "Let me tell you something about the advertising industry. It is completely dominated by young people.
hmm,
Most of the copywriters are young, and they are going to listen to the polls that reflect what they believe, and that's how this myth got started. That you really want to get the young people up to the age of 45 or whatever it is. They had the whole list of characteristics, and he said, "Well, the reason for that is most of the copywriters are young, and those are the people they listen to."
yeah. Well, I just find it fascinating that you have one poll that has President Reagan at 46, and then another poll that has him at 32, and they're both
I
being,
think you meant President Trump.
yeah, President Trump, yeah, that has one poll at 46 and the other one at 32.
Yeah.
Again, something wrong with that. One of those two can have. I mean, they both cannot be right,
No.
as they say. Well, one quick thing about President Reagan, I think I may have gotten ahead of myself when I said Reagan by mistake a minute ago, and that is that it was 45 years ago today that he was shot, coming out of
Yes.
that speech he was giving. And
Yes.
I happened to be in Mexico City when that happened, and I'm walking back to the office that we had there. And as I walk into the office, the lady who was the receptionist or the secretary said, "Your mom just called." And that's not normal that your mom would call in the middle of the day. So I thought there was something wrong.
Yeah.
So I called my mom, who was at the time living in the Dallas area with, well, my dad and my parents were living in the Dallas area. And I called my mom and I asked her what happened. And she goes, "Reagan was shot." And I said, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know anything." So
Mm.
it was at that moment that I learned. And then I turned on the TV there in the office that we had. And in Mexico City back in 1981, we had like a cable TV station from the United States that would come in. It was like from South Texas, and I was watching, I think, ABC when that who was broadcasting at the time. So anyway, that's how I learned, and it's amazing what could have happened that day if the bullet had just been a millimeter one way or the other, Bill.
Well, I understand exactly what you're saying. I remember the day that President Kennedy was shot, and I was getting out of the army that day. I was at Fort Dix, New Jersey, and I was getting my papers ready to go home, and got a ride from a buddy of mine, and we were riding into the city, and it came over the radio that, and then we got into Pennsylvania Station, and the station was completely silent. I've never seen or heard a train station so completely silent. I mean, it was obviously people had learned, and they stopped talking, and the atmosphere that day was just horrible. It was
Yeah.
horrible. Nobody ever thought this would happen.
Hmm.
Not in modern times. We knew about, of course, the Lincoln assassination and others that had occurred in the past, the attempt on President Roosevelt, but nobody thought this would actually happen, where a president would be assassinated again. The last one where there was a successful assassination, I believe, had been McKinley.
Yeah, and that
Way,
was in
way,
1901.
yes, and this was 1963. Uh,
Yeah.
and of course, then we saw the rest of the weekend. This was a Friday. We went home, watched our television, and the whole country, for the first time in its history, could watch all the events surrounding an assassination of the president, including the murder of his assassin.
Right.
And you
Exactly.
saw that on live television.
It may no that must have been an amazing. I was not here at the time. We
Yes.
were in Cuba still, but yeah, that must have been absolutely remarkable. Um, but as far as President Reagan, what it was the first time that I had ever gone through an assassination like that for a president, and what I thought was remarkable was his sense of humor when he
Yes.
was being taken to the hospital. When he said, "I hope you guys are all Republicans." I thought that was pretty good. And the other one was the medical doctor coming out, I guess later in the afternoon, almost early evening, doing the first, medical report. And, the way he was explaining where the bullet was, it was so fascinating because he was like pointing to his own chest,
Yes.
if you remember that.
Yes.
So anyway, well, we're glad that he made it. We're glad that he
We
made it.
sure are.
That was, that would have been something. Well, let's talk a little bit, Bill, about the Democrat Party and the TSA problems, people not being paid. I guess they're finally going to be paid because of this executive order. But the idea, Bill, and this is what upsets me. I look, we've been through these these shutdowns before, and I've always criticized them because I don't think anybody gains from them.
No.
But if you're going to shut down something, it's one thing to shut down a museum. It's quite another one to mess up with airports. And here you have thousands of people who are traveling, including people I know who got stuck at airports. And I'm going, my goodness, I mean, who thought of this? This is truly insane. And they're
Yes.
doing it, Bill. They're doing it because they want to reform ICE. That's what they say. But
Yes.
ICE has already been funded.
That's exactly right. Well, it was a completely irrational thing to do, but we're dealing with the Democratic Party, which is completely irrational these days. What is amazing to me is this all takes place at a time of war. Now, it may not be World War II, but
Right.
it is a time of war where at any moment the thing could explode into something involving nuclear weapons. And I have never seen the absolute, utter lack of patriotism on the part of those in government. Usually, when you have men in the field, women in the field, in danger, the country comes together at least in some way and doesn't interfere with the operations. And when you think of the fact that while all this was going on, we had brave men and women flying combat missions over Iran. And the people who did this didn't seem to even care.
Right.
Sometimes you wonder if they even knew. I mean, that I haven't seen in my lifetime. There used to be a cliche in politics that politics stops at the water's edge. Well, that hasn't been true in years because we've seen plenty of situations where politics went on when the combat was going on, but under different circumstances. You try to avoid hurting the country in any way, and that was not the case this time.
Well, but again, you're right. I mean, I agree with you. You're hurting the country. You're putting people at risk because you have all of these people, thousands of people in an airport. All of a sudden, they become a soft terrorist target. Something that somebody was mentioning the other day on TV.
Absolutely.
You have thousands of people. I mean, Houston, at the Houston airport, there's a couple of them. This is George Bush Airport. The other one was called Hobby. But Bush International, they were 5-hour delays of up to 5 hours.
That's right.
And you have people who are missing their flights. These are people who are going, to see family members. There was even one story of a man who was flying to see his father who was dying. And then, of course, you have the business traveler, too, who's being impacted. And all of this is being done in the name of, I guess, reforming ICE.
Reforming ICE, yes.
Yeah. I don't even know what that means, because reforming ICE, Bill, means you got to go in and change the law, not the
That's
funding.
right. Yes,
I
that's
mean,
right. Well,
so,
look, this is a function of the of what passes for the Democratic Party today. It is not the party I grew up in. I think that Jack Kennedy uh, would not recognize this party today and would not even be admitted to this party today because he was too patriotic. I mean, it is astounding to watch American politics and realize that the two parties are each one in a different era.
mm-hmm.
They really are. The Democratic Party is a train wreck. It is an embarrassment to the public. It's an embarrassment to the people who are members. The Republican Party, well, is in pretty good shape, in part because it's really Donald Trump's party.
Right.
When he leaves the public scene, maybe it'll break up, maybe it won't break up. But to watch this go on and to think of people on those lines for 5 hours, many of whom are traveling because they have serious troubles, as you pointed out, somebody who might be dying, a relative might be dying, they might have a child in distress, and for the people in Congress not to care, just
Right.
to make it plain they don't care.
Yeah, it is remarkable. A Democrat was saying, I don't remember the name, but the Democrat was saying that by putting ICE at the airports, that President Trump was killing tourism. And I'm sitting there, what's killing tourism is people who have to go through our airports.
That's right.
I mean, if you're here from France and you got to go to the Houston airport for 5 hours, you might want to reconsider where you travel next.
Yes.
And it's like, and then of course the other thing that happened here in Houston at the airport, I guess I'm familiar with Houston because we've seen the news a lot here. And in the Houston airport, when I showed up, people started applauding.
Yes. Well, the people from ICE who were sent to the airports apparently did an excellent job. And of course, they were trained in dealing with people and dealing with law enforcement. And there wasn't a single bad incident involving the ICE personnel. They helped things along. And I wonder what's going to come next, because now we have the first of all, we have a holiday week, and we have concerns about terrorism in the United States, or terrorism inspired acts in the United States. And the people in Washington, well, they're not home they're not there anymore. They're on a vacation.
Yeah, and I guess they get special treatment, don't they, when they go through airports?
Well,
they don't actually have, as I understand, they get special treatment. They don't have to go through those lines.
Yes, they usually do. I don't know if it was the case this time, but I didn't hear anything different.
Well, a lot of them fly out of military airplanes anyway, or
yes,
they probably fly out of Andrews, not out of National or Reagan or the other one. But I don't know. I just think it's a bad look when your country's airports are messed up because the political parties cannot agree to funding, something as important as the people who run security. I mean,
Homeland Security.
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah, well, again, we're not talking here about closing down museums.
That's right.
Or maybe a park. I don't like that either, but at least the national security portion of that is not quite the same. But anyway, what a mess. I'm sorry. You were going to say something.
Well, I'm just going to say it is so embarrassing to us as a nation when foreign countries read about this at a very time when the president of the United States is asking those countries for help. in the effort in over Iran. I mean, the president is running a major military operation in the interests of protecting the next generation from nuclear weapons, and he's confronted with a bunch of politicians in Washington who are screwing everything up.
Right. Now, I have a theory, Bill, and I may have mentioned this before, so you may have heard this before, but I have a theory that what is behind all of this in the Democrat Party is the fear of a primary. That
Yes.
is what is driving this party to do some very, very crazy things, is the fear of a primary, and no one is more afraid than Senator Schumer.
That's right.
Because he's got one coming, from what I understand.
Well, if he stays in office and goes through with it,
Yeah.
I think he'll be primaried by AOC or somebody. And you're right, primaries are in the Democratic Party today are kind of far more important than they used to be. At one time, the primary was 2 or 3 people who got together and competed for the nomination. It was part of the process. Today, the primary system is a deadly system in the Democratic Party. If you get primaried, it means that you have made unhappy certain parts of the party that are very powerful in primaries.
Right.
And it's a frightening time in that respect.
Well, in New Jersey, the 11th district, they were trying to replace the governor who was just elected, the lady governor, and they had a primary, and one of these people from the left actually defeated one of the moderates. Here in Texas, the man who always puts on a show every time President Trump speaks before the Congress, Mr. Green, Al Green. Not to be confused with the composer musician Al Green.
Right.
Not to be confused with him, but he lost in the primary. Well, he's going to the runoff, but I mean that was still pretty remarkable. He'll probably lose the result. I think this is what's happening with that party, that if you're a member of that party, you're saying, I got to get through the primary season, and then maybe I'll go back to sanity again. But I got to keep these people from primaries because they will primary you.
That's right. And if you get through the primaries and then you get to the general election as the candidate, you're then pressured to appear moderate, even though you're not moderate, get elected like the one in Virginia,
right,
and then turn out to be a radical leftist.
Yeah, that's an amazing story out of Virginia.
Is.
But the one thing that I would say is that based on early turnouts and some polling data, it's not a done deal that they're going to get those districts. And in a way, I wish those districts would lose, because I thought that was so over the top to go from 6-5 Democrats to 10-1 Democrats. I mean, come on, that is so over the top.
Yes.
I know people say, well, in Texas you had districts or redistricting. Yeah, we did, but it wasn't that extreme in terms of the makeup of the congressional delegation. But anyway, Bill, another little angle here before we get to Iran. Another little angle here is these marches. Who this Saturday, I guess we had the No Kings March. That in itself shows you how stupid they are.
Well, of course, no kings. This is based on the idea that Trump is trying to become an emperor of the United States. That's absurd. It's completely absurd, and it's just the No Kings March. I mean, it's weird. Now, throughout American history, there have always been those who claim that the president in power is trying to become a dictator. That is not an unusual charge in American politics. It was charged against President Roosevelt repeatedly because he was in office for so long.
President Lincoln. I mean,
President Lincoln actually did take very substantial power during the Civil War, and he suspended habeas corpus and other things. But that's always been an issue in American politics. It never really amounts to much. But the No Kings March is particularly hilarious because many of the people who finance these marchers, these billionaires,
Right.
one of whom I think now lives in is it Hong Kong?
Okay.
They are kings themselves.
Right.
You know,
Right. Very wealthy people. Yeah.
very wealthy people.
What I find hilarious is that if President Trump was a king, then why would he be afraid of losing the midterms?
Yes,
I
yes.
mean, why? Kings, I don't remember too many kings from history who even had elections, or for that matter, tolerated protest. Um, but the whole thing is so stupid, and yet you
Well,
got these
it
people
is
out there
stupid.
with their placards. We don't want a king, and then they're being
Yes,
interviewed on TV,
and
and they're
hands
saying,
off Cuba.
"Yeah, that's right,
Hands
hands off everybody these
yes.
days,"
Uh,
and incredible, just incredible.
well, we had them here, big time over the last weekend, and then they had some demonstrations where people were flying communist flags. I think it's the same people. I think there must be an academy they go to. The protest academy where they learn how to protest in accordance with the old red groups. You know, well, now
Right,
today,
right.
folks, we're going to learn
Yeah,
how to use the words "hands off," and you're going to learn how the real pros do it.
right. Well, I mean, they have the same placards, and
Yes,
all they have to do is change the country.
yes,
Hands off Cuba, that was one. Hands off Vietnam, that was the other. Hands off
hands
Iraq,
off,
that was the
and even hands off Iran. I mean, they they
yes.
they had that
But,
one.
but what was troubling and hilarious, I guess I'll say both, is that in New York City there were actual communist flags that
Oh
were
yes,
they were
yes,
shown there. Now, how many people does that represent? Probably not as many as they think, but it's troubling to see a communist flag, flying in the United States as some kind of an expression
yes,
against a king. I mean, come on. And then, of course, the one that I love, the one that I love is gays for Palestine. That still tops the list when it comes to
yes.
placards. I mean, that's got to be the that's the Hall of Fame placard.
Right, right. Well, there's always one that stands out, um, and they always have the classic interviews with the marchers. Why are you marching, sir? Well, I believe in gay rights in Palestine,
Right.
and and I believe in well whatever they're saying. I believe in. Yes, that's true, and you wonder again, where does the money come from?
Well,
Where
sure.
does the money come from? And I think it is one of the most unreported stories in the United States that what we had last year, for example, on college campuses, we now know that this was all paid for. And, what one day after the horror in Israel, where the murders took place, that started this whole thing, the October 7th murders, there were thousands of Palestinian flags flying in New York. I have never gone into a store and
Right.
seen a Palestinian flag on
Right.
sale. It's not a
I,
big item. It
no,
really is.
I wouldn't even know how to order one. I
Right,
mean, if
right.
if we were putting together a march and you say, "Hey, we got to come up with some Palestine flags," I said, "Okay, who do you call?"
Yeah,
Because
right.
I don't think too many flag shops have them. Uh, but incredible, and then when they were talking to this lady, this one I saw. They were talking to this lady, and the lady said, "Well, they took away my reproductive rights." So I go, I'm watching this. They
Yes.
took away my reproductive rights. And I'm sitting there saying, no, they really didn't. All
No.
they did was send it to the men and women in the States, and now they can choose whether they want abortion or not.
Yes.
And I'm surprised the reporter, and I don't know, these reporters are in a bit of a difficult situation because if they ask too many questions, they won't talk to them. But
Right.
I would have asked this lady, well, they had 1 million abortions last year. How did that happen if they took away your reproductive rights? So
That's right.
it,
Well, they don't
a
know.
lot of it
They
just
don't.
doesn't make any sense.
Oh, well, yes. Look, there's a crackpot vote. There always has been a crackpot vote in every election, but it seems that the number of crackpots is now may approach the number of legitimate voters, and look, the press coverage tends to be thin. Reporters should be asking questions that they refuse to ask or are afraid to ask. It was pointed out, back in 2008 when Obama ran that after he won the election, it was Tom Brokaw who said we have just elected a president about whom we know so very little, and of
Right.
course that's the role of the press to tell us who this person is, to tell us what he or she actually believes and what the history is, and that was the year some people felt that real journalism in America died, and it was
Right.
then now going to be journalism based on people's uh, uh, ethnic group and who their father was, and I think that's true to a certain degree.
Well, I thought one particular interview was very funny. Um, this guy was talking about, well, we don't want kings, we want, power to the people. That's another one, power to the people. I love that one. I wasn't
Yes,
sure.
which
I'm
which
never sure if they're talking about electricity or political power, but anyway,
yes,
power to the people. But so anyway, he's going through the litany of things that apparently they're trying to protect us from Trump. And then the reporter, I thought it was a good question. He or she, I think it was a lady. The lady said, "Well, wait a minute. Kamala Harris didn't get a single vote to be nominated for the Democrat nomination. She was
yes,
basically given the job." And all of a sudden, the guy just starts saying, "Well, I don't want to talk to you anymore."
right,
And and of course, that's a very legitimate question she asked, I thought.
yes, yes,
I mean, but it's not the first time in history that that's probably happened. I'm not saying that. Well, maybe it is the first time because we had an incumbent who decided not to run, and the vice president was basically given the nomination.
yes.
But anyway, whatever the case, marches. We just keep on marching. Power to the people. Hands
Oh,
off.
definitely. Oh, the people. We care about the people.
Yes,
I don't know what people we care about today, but maybe tomorrow it'll be different people.
that's it. That's it. No, it's just crazy. Well,
Yeah.
let's talk about Iran. Big
All right.
topic, of course. We're still in. I guess it's a month into this operation, and I actually, I'm glad that President Trump made this decision. I think that you couldn't kick the can forward anymore with Iran since 1979. These people, I mean, I'm giving you maybe the talking points on supporting the war, but I believe it. I mean, I think at some point you have to deal with this country, and he's dealing with it.
Yes.
And I guess right now it all comes down to how it gets fixed or how it gets solved. I also think that they're making too much out of the ground troops argument. I have no problem with ground troops if they're being used, let's say, to protect nuclear materials or maybe to facilitate something in the Straits of Hormuz. I mean, you can't just do it from the air. I mean, at
No.
some point, you got to put men on the field.
Well, that's the point that people don't understand. That first of all, he never promised that there would be no ground troops. He said there'd be no American troops on the ground directly fighting, but he kind of hedged that also because in wartime, you're quite right. You cannot gain territory unless you have men on the ground seizing that territory, and this is an old problem and an old discussion that the use of air power and thinking that air power alone can win a war. I don't think it's actually ever happened. You have to have some type of ground operation. And in this particular case, it could be a considerable ground operation. We read, at least the current reporting, is that a number of troops are being sent to the Middle East, mostly Marines, on separate ships. And also, in addition to the Marines, I should add elements of the 82nd Airborne Division, which, of course, is an airdropped Army division. And the question that comes up is, well, is this being done for show to scare the daylights out of the enemy, or is it for real that we intend to use these troops? And I think it's a little bit of both. A little bit of both. I think there is a show aspect to it that the enemy will see what we are building up to and say, do we really want to fight these people? And on the other hand, he may very well have in mind ground operations that have become necessary by what they have found in the war so far. And one of the things they found is they cannot by air get to certain targets because they're underground or they are inaccessible to us, and we will have to use probably special forces raids that will do it. That's a touchy subject and a very touchy subject, and it's one that we're going to have to deal with.
Well, I guess it depends how long the ground troops or boots on the ground operation runs. You know, if you can get it over in a short time, that's one thing. If we have troops on the ground in November fighting a war, then that politically is difficult. But the whole boots on the ground argument, I think, is based on a mistaken analysis of what happened in Afghanistan and Iraq. I don't think that what happened in Iraq is that we had troops on the ground. What happened and excuse me, not Iraq, but Afghanistan, is that we had troops on the ground because the last when those troops were taken out in 2021 and we walked out,
Yes,
there was no fighting going on.
that's right.
There was no fighting going on in Afghanistan for like 5 years. I mean, they were doing targeted, specialized operations, but there wasn't. You know, you didn't have the battles that you had back in right after 9/11 or something like that when you were
That's right.
confronting. So it wasn't really that issue. And over in Iraq, and I believe this very strongly, when Bush handed Iraq to President Obama, things were fairly stable. And then President Obama decided to take the troops out in 2011. And that, in my opinion, is what messed up the whole thing.
Of course.
Because you had this huge vacuum and that we created. Had he left 5,000 troops there, it would have been different. But by taking everything out, then you left this vacuum, and who filled it? ISIS. And
Yes.
so, anyway, so that's why I think all of this talk about we don't want to repeat the mistakes of Iran and Afghanistan. I don't think that was the problem that we had ground troops. I just think it was the way the wars ended, Bill.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I'm glad you brought up the word ended because the way this ends is how it's going to be remembered in history. And I think many people are saying, and I've been one of them, that this is the big issue that will decide the fate of President Trump in history, how he ends the conflict with Iran. If he succeeds and the Middle East is changed and changed for the better, he will go down as a great president. And I think there's at least among rational people. But if he fails and this regime is still in power when he leaves office, he will go down as an important but somewhat failed president.
Yeah,
And I think he knows that. I think he knows that this will decide his legacy.
I think you're right about that. And I, at least for the moment, I am willing to give him the benefit of the doubt because he's got information I don't have.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I also trust the people around him, especially Secretary Rubio,
Oh, yeah.
and I trust the military. So I guess for the time being, I'm willing to say, okay, stick to it. But you're right. I mean, if out of all of this in 60 days, you have a government in Iran that is friendly to the United States, my goodness, what an accomplishment. When you think of what we have lived through, Bill, from 1979 to now, all those years of Iran being the number one source for problems in the world, and now all of a sudden they have a friendly government. What
Yeah.
a change that would
That
be.
would be terrific if it happened. Whether it happens, I don't know. The Iranians the bad Iranians are getting help from Russia. They're getting help from other sources. I have no doubt that they're getting some help from even sources in the United States that are not particularly kind to their own country. Uh, but if it works out in the end, and the greatest thing would be if the Iranian people could rise up and throw the government out. That's a tough order. It really is, because you rise up in Iran, the government will start shooting their own people as they have in the past.
Right, right. But sorry about that, a little
That's all right.
allergy there. But but at the same time, if people perceive that the government is collapsing, they may do it. In other words, if the public in Iran says, this government is collapsing, maybe they'll go out in the streets and go after the government, Bill.
I hope so. I hope so. And we would then have to back them in some way, aid them in some way, even if it means parachuting in food supplies or other supplies. And almost inevitably there will have to be some people on the ground, special forces, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, to aid the whole thing, or Israeli agents, but something that will help them along, and to end this thing on a note of victory. That would be terrific if we could see Iran, the government of Iran, toppled, and that threat to the world eliminated, and the Middle East changed because of it. You would have a great ending, and if Mr. Trump is still in office at the time, he will go down in greatness. And I think that is what so many of these people on the left in the United States fear. They're not going to
But
give him the they're not going to
that's
give
right.
him the Nobel Peace Prize. That's for sure. They're going to give it to some little organization somewhere, in upper Trinidad,
Right,
that provides
right,
lollipops for children or something like
right.
that.
Yeah, and
But
there's nothing wrong with that, but they should
no,
consider Trump as well for something
yes,
like this. But again, I think it's all up in the air right now. But Trump is taking a chance here, no question about it. And like you say, this whole thing could fail, but I'm optimistic it's going to succeed. And if we have to send special forces to secure some territory where they may have nuclear materials, or I hear that we could be sending Marines to secure some of these islands where the ships go through. I don't have a problem with that. That's very different than sending troops into a country and fighting as we did in Iran or Vietnam or whatever, Bill.
yeah, absolutely.
I
Of
mean,
course it
that,
is. Well,
yeah,
I get the feeling we're gonna know a great deal in the next 2 weeks.
I think so. I think so. Now, let me ask you one last question about that. He President Trump keeps talking about, he seems to be moving the deadline and say, well, I'm going to give him a little bit more time. I'm going to give him a little bit more time. I mean, in a way, if the diplomatic solution works, that's a good thing. But if it doesn't, then that means he's going to have to react very strongly.
Well, yes, that's a very good point. He has given them a deadline. Yes, he can extend it and say, well, the talks are going very, very well. But if that's the case, they better be going well. I
Right.
mean, you can't end that and say, well, it didn't work out the way we wanted them to. He is given specific deadlines now that, yes, they could be extended if the talks really are going well, and he expects a settlement. But he will know, I think, in the next week or so, if the talks really are going well, or if we have
Yeah.
been fooled again. And I think then he is going to have to take
Right.
some military action involving the industrial base of Iran, and it will have to
Right.
be very harsh action.
It is.
It's
Now,
the old story in international politics. If you say you're going to take Vienna, take Vienna. You got to
that's
do
right.
it.
That's right. No, you're exactly right. And I don't know. Well, I guess we're going to find out in the next 10 days or so. I don't think it'll go. I'm I'll make a prediction. I don't think it'll go beyond May 1st. I
Mm,
mean, April is here tomorrow or the
yes,
next day. So I have a feeling the month of April is going to be the big month for this war. And we'll see. We'll see. But I do think he's kind of, and I hate to say he's boxed in, but if you keep delaying the negotiations, then at some point you're going to have to go in and drop a lot of bombs, really. Basically, that's what that means.
yes,
And but at the same time, you don't want to destroy the country that you hope can get up later and be your friend. So I don't know. It's a tough call. It's a tough call, that one. But I do trust the military. I'll put it that way. I think the job those military guys are doing is fabulous, Bill.
Incredible. I've never seen such precision.
Yes.
And after all, most of these men and women who are fighting from the air in Iran have never been in combat before.
Right.
And what a terrific job. And while every loss is painful, the losses are so small compared to the damage inflicted on the enemy. I've never seen a ratio like that before.
Yeah.
We truly have an amazing military.
We really do. Amazing. And when you think about it, most of them are young people in their 20s. That's the
Yes.
amazing thing, you know. Another a quick thing I wanted to mention here at the end. Imagine the following situation. You open up the straits, and within 2 weeks, the oil is flowing normal. All of a sudden, we're paying $2.20 for gasoline again in Texas, like we were a month or so ago. And all of a sudden, that pressure drops of the cost of gasoline. I think that could also solve his political problems, because I'm not sure the American people are angry that we're destroying Iran. It could be more than, gee, do I have to pay $3.50 for a gallon?
Yeah, that's the way people think. Yep.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if that's what's hurting him more than actually a war with Iran, because any rational person, I mean, unless you have been living, well, some people are living in fantasy, but unless you've lived in a fantasy for the last 40 years, Iran has been the number one problem in the world.
Absolutely.
So getting rid of that problem, I don't see why anybody would object to it, but I suppose.
Well, there are people who are completely out of touch with the world and out of touch with the needs of the next generation. Look, we had this before Pearl Harbor. If you took a poll of Americans, well, there's that word poll again, a day before Pearl Harbor, you'd probably find strong objection to going to war with Japan.
Right.
Well, once they attacked us, the objections faded away.
They faded away.
Yeah, and yet, on the other hand, go back to the election of 1942, the congressional elections of 1942, less than a year after Pearl Harbor, and the president's party took a beating.
That's right. That's right. Exactly right. Well, Bill, as always, it's a great pleasure to have you. Great honor to have you. We have a lot to talk about the next time, so make yourself some good notes, because we have a lot to talk about.
We will not be running out of subjects.
No, that's for sure. That's for sure. And we haven't even spoken about. Oh, there was another little story that we won't have time to get to today, but there's a story that somebody was saying the Democrats. This is a Democrat who was telling them they have to nominate a white guy to run for president. That no more women, no more minorities. It has to be a white man.
Yeah.
And I'm saying how far we've come.
Yeah, yes, we have. Have we not?
Have we not? All right, Bill. Thank you for your time, as always.
My pleasure.
All right. Our good friend, Bill Katz, the editor of Urgent Agenda. Again, we're talking about Iran. That's the number one topic. And how it goes, we will see. I'm optimistic, but, I'm realistic also. And so we got to deal with that somewhere between being optimistic and realistic. Hopefully there is a middle ground. Well, thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye, everybody.